All right, for the first binary episode of the year, episode 101, which would be 5 in decimal, I guess. Why not? We were off last week, and I was away the week before that helping my friend. Well, he wasn't there, but anyway, thanks to Matt Alderman for filling in for me while I was gone. Today, NVIDIA, TDoS, APT31, Perseverance, and bad typing. All this and more on the Security Weekly News for the week of 21 February.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the attackers that put our critical systems in jeopardy. Core Impact from Core Security is a penetration testing tool that safely finds vulnerabilities using the same techniques of adversaries, with certified exploits and wizards that guide you through critical pen tests while maximizing the time of advanced testers by automating their routines. With Core Security, you can safeguard your infrastructure by limiting access, detecting threats, testing for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitoring data. Visit securityweekly.com/core security.
All right, we are going. The FBI issued a warning that denial of service attacks are now being heavily used against emergency dispatch centers. These kind of attacks, which are called telephony denial of service or TDoS, are not anything new. I mean, people have been doing this as long as there's been telephones. I'm sure that, Alexander Graham Bell couldn't help but calling some people, up over and over again. I remember setting up a dial-up modem. There was a guy on the dorm floor that was really, really annoying, and he always played like awful country music really loud and stuff. And I remember setting a dial-up modem to just, auto dial repeatedly his room, just like forever, and it never stopped. Just put a little loop script on there, very annoying kind of stuff, statute of limitations. But these are a lot more annoying, of course, than these sort of prank calls, because they really can tie up all the inbound points for the emergency call centers. So this is the targeting of the place. And so essentially what those emergency call centers are is that's when you call 911, and instead of getting somebody who says 911, how may I help you, you get a busy signal, which is pretty awful if you're trying to dial 911 anyway. So modern approaches to what I was doing use things like soft VoIPs. So, you can set up 100 virtual phones on a soft VoIP console, and then just you could just flood SIP packets anyway. So you could flood just billions of SIP packets in there, and all those things can create large numbers of inbound calls, and then even prevent the 911 people from dialing out. But the inbound obviously is the more important there. And of course, there's other ways that people have been doing this, according to this FBI report, which was they were sometimes using physical modems, or they were just hiring people, like a warehouse full of workers to make the calls. So, I mean, all this, some of these people are back in this sort of, do you have Sir Walter Raleigh in a can type of stuff, mischief. And then, of course, there are ransoms have been posted for this stuff as well. So it's pretty much the usual range of suspects that are doing this. And I'm sure some nation states are involved in, at least evaluating this kind of thing. I did ask someone about this, and they told me that it's a good idea to have the non-911 numbers of your locale in your phone already. I already had that, but just if you haven't thought about that, it may be something for your organization that you want to think about having available. Great Horn Research reported that there had been a huge jump in malformed URL prefix attacks. We've all seen, HTTPS://. I mean, that's been there, and HTTP:// forever. But apparently, and I never thought about this, the 4 slashes, which is what those things are called, are not really important. So these attacks that they were talking about use a / / to kind of make a caret or a hat kind of symbol. And so the ones they were showing basically said HTTP://. And I immediately tried it, of course, and guess what? The slashes are not considered at all by the browser. It just immediately updates and ignores them completely. So it's not a typo squatting attack, and it's not a puny-code attack, which are both sort of sleight of hands to get you to go to the wrong site. to go to Microsift or Upidil or something like that. But instead, they're really trying to beat our old friend NetNanny. So NetNanny filtering type things, which is basically what people have been using at schools and so forth forever, has been, the target of middle schoolers and high school kids since time immemorial of how do I get around this thing that won't let me go to, superpornstar.com because it's on a list of things that are blocked. So the filters usually have http:// in front of them, and the filter does consider that. So when people have been putting up these phishing filters to keep people from going to phishing sites, well, when you change the / to a //, all of a sudden the filter doesn't detect it because it's not on the list. So beyond that, the attack is just another way to get you to go to the same old phishing sites that you've been avoiding for so long. A Microsoft exploit, CVE 2017-0005. So this is an old exploit. Been around since 2017, so that's what, going on 4 years now. It's 0005, so it's probably pretty early in 2017. This exploit was used by both the NSA and the Chinese to develop hacking tools around that particular vulnerability. And this is a privilege escalation attack that was involved in some of these libraries. And you can, if you haven't read up on that exploit in the past, feel free to go do so on that CVE. Kaspersky reported this vulnerability in 2015, actually, and it was attributed back then to a group called the Equation Group, which was described by Kaspersky as the most sophisticated attack group they had ever seen at the time. So 2015. If you don't remember that group, the Equation Group was also associated with the 0 days that was used in Stuxnet, and Flamer was another one that they developed 0 days for. So supposedly, now this article goes in there and it's a little squishy. So they go in there and they say, well, the group was reputed to be involved with the NSA Tailored Access Operations Group. But then they also kind of hedge that and say, yeah, but this is not really confirmed. So probably we don't know exactly who these people were and what they were up to and how that was involving the NSA. But the new findings are about a tool called Jiang. And Jiang, if your Chinese isn't so good, and mine isn't either, but it probably is the character for sword, which is like, yeah. So Jiang means sword, but they didn't put the tone on there, so you don't know if it was some other character or not, and they didn't have the character, so I just had to guess. So I guessed that it was sword. So a Jiang is like a Chinese sword like they use in, like Kung Fu and stuff. But anyway, I couldn't decide what it was, but Jiang was found being used by APT31, Zirconium Group, which basically, when they looked at it, was a reconstructed version of the Equation Group tool that had existed before. But Checkpoint, who was writing about that part of it, said that there were meaningful changes in the new tool. So they're saying it's not the same tool, but it looks like it. And they went on to say that it was probably reverse engineered from the tool, which is called EPMI. That was the Equation Group's original tool. And but the modern code in Jiang was not as professional. But it looked like maybe they reverse engineered it and just took the pieces they could figure out and used it to accomplish the same task using this old CVE. Jiang was first found and reported by Lockheed Martin's team, and they said APT31 may have used it against an American target. And again, the article kind of gets squishy there, and they're like, but theoretically, APT31 used it against some unnamed American target, but they didn't really get into that. Anyway, if you're interested in that, there was a lot of stories about this particular thing this week because some people were, some of the headlines said that it was an NSA tool that was being used. Some said it was something else. It's not exactly clear to me exactly where this tool came from or who used it, other than APT31 used it, which is affiliated with China. So it's probably worth the read if you're interested in such things, which you probably are. Researchers at the University of Texas San Antonio reported an attack framework that attempts to infer what someone's typing on the other end of a video call. And we had a story about this before because some people were talking about this and about, watching all these movements. This was further research into this area. Basically, they're looking at body movements. But they were looking at, could you go back to Twitch, YouTube, and all these videos from history and discern what somebody's typing while they're making videos. And people log into things, people use their passwords. Anybody that's ever taught a class that had like live stuff probably had to log into a system to do it. I've certainly done that. And of course, if you're sharing your screen and you forget and share, the wrong time, or you type the password and the username, that's why we never use our own, passwords for that. But basically, the upper body had to be visible in the video, and the more of the upper body that was visible, the better it was. The framework first goes in, strips out the background, it converts it all to grayscale, and then it isolates, just like facial rec, your left and your right arm. And so the arm frames are then used to attempt to measure body movements, and they're trying to guess then what frames in the video have keystrokes in them. So they're just looking to see if they think you're typing, and then they try to predict what you typed. The research, I guess, initially was tested like with 20 participants who had varying typing skill sets. And so the interesting thing was, and it makes a lot of sense to me, if you were wearing a sleeveless outfit and you were a terrible typist, so now you're one of those people that's going, that kind of typing, especially if you mouth the letters as you're typing them, and I've seen people type like that. But if you're a touch typist and, you barely move, like I'm a touch typist, I had to learn to do that in grad school. And so I could type and look at, what was going on. So apparently that didn't work very well. But basically, the worse your typing got, I guess, the better it was. In the reported tests, they got the username 91% of the time, but they only got 20% of the passwords. That's still pretty scary if you think about going back to all the 100 billion hours of YouTube videos and using some automated tool to try to find places where people typed in passwords. And I know that's what you're thinking about right now. Have I ever made a YouTube video where I typed my password? Hopefully you've changed that. But I certainly immediately, when I was reading this article, I was thinking about that. I was like, did I ever use anything like that? And of course, in meetings, you see people typing all the time. And a lot of times they may well be logging into stuff. So, you might want to change your password away from Big Daddy or whatever it is at some point if you used that in any videos a long time ago. I don't think they're going to get much from touch typists, but, you probably get something out of the reflection in my eyes or something. I've seen that kind of stuff too. Since we're on the research for the moment, a new approach was reported from Ruhr University Bochum, which demonstrated a way around digitally signed PDF documents. So I guess we're back to sealing wax or something now. Basically, they called this a shadow attack. And in this shadow attack, and it was presented at the Network and Distributed Systems Security Symposium, they tested 16 different PDF viewers. And the attacker basically creates two documents. So they create the original document that's signed, which is what you expect to get, and they make another one which has a bunch of hidden content in it. And that content doesn't display until after the signing has been done. So basically what happens is the person reading the document opens a signed document that someone sent them that's now been resent to them by the attacker, and the signature is checked and validated. And then what is displayed is something else. That's the shadow text. They compared it to basically getting somebody to sign a document with a lot of blank space on it, and then somebody sits down with a typewriter and types stuff into the blanks, which I've heard of people doing. So some of this has been patched, but if you are relying on signed PDFs for anything serious, you may want to read this and see if you're vulnerable to this type of attack. The researchers did provide some open source tools that you can download that could be used to detect this or test it. NVIDIA made a really weird announcement this week, which I read this article twice because I was like, am I missing something here? And I still don't really get it. Basically, what they said was that since crypto mining was bad, I mean, to sum up what they said, crypto mining sucks. So they basically took the drivers for the RTX 3060 chipset, which is like their newest stuff, and it's not even been released yet, but it's due out this week. And they're going to bias it against crypto mining. Now, okay, so initially it was like, well, I don't like stuff like that, but okay. But so basically what they said was the driver will attack itself if you're trying to do crypto mining calculations on the GPU, but then they went on and said on Ethereum. And so Basically, if you're doing other crypto mining, apparently it doesn't do anything because they said they couldn't quite get that part to work or something. But it just sounds like a terrible idea to me. Anytime I hear a company and they say, we're gonna decide what I get to do or I shouldn't do with hardware that I purchased, and maybe they're trying to protect people from Monero, but it's Ethereum. And I really hate it when people cripple stuff. And they say, oh, we're going to cripple this and sell it to you. Can you say 386SX? If you don't get that, look it up. But I mean, basically, they're crippling their driver because they decided arbitrarily that Ethereum crypto mining was bad. I'm like, why don't you just let me decide that? I personally, that announcement would keep me from buying a product that used that driver because I don't really know what I want to do with that yet. And I don't get it, guys. So, and if you aren't going to stop me from Bitcoin mining, what's the point? All right. Well, joining us now, a person so tough that even when he was forced to gnaw off his own arm on Mount McKinley, his only response to the rescuers was, I really wish we had some of those little Tabasco bottles. I really thought we brought some, and that would have made everything so much better. So, Jason Wood, welcome back.
It's good to be back with both arms. So, it's good to be back with everybody. I was kind of hunting around today what I was going to talk about, and I found something I figured would be just for us security folks. Maybe for those who want to get a little bit more experience and maybe work their way into a new position. So instead of discussing government policies that I don't like, that they're dealing with security, or a situation with operational technology security or North Korean hackers, let's talk about how to learn something new and some opportunities that we could build into our own kind of little training, if you will. Today I found a write-up, and what made me think of this, I found a write-up by a gentleman named Jan Capriva on the Internet Storm Center site about analyzing a malicious Excel file. And as he describes the situation, basically he received a reply to a post that he had made to the full disclosure mailing list several years ago. Apparently he found a flaw with a CMS application and posted it there. And last week, somebody finally decided to reply to him. As he's walking through this, he opens up the message and shows it a screenshot. It looks totally goofy and suspicious. Anybody in security would be looking at this going, this is obviously malicious. But he decided to play around with it. Maybe he was bored. Maybe he just thought this would make a good blog post. I'm not sure. But he started digging into it. And so he walks through the process as he goes through and cracks open this email, opens it in a text file as a text editor, takes a look at the email headers there, has some comments on the original sender address that looks obviously spoofed, and continues on. And if you've never opened up an email in its text form, it's something for you to look at because you'll find quite a bit of information there that you may not think or have known about. Next, he digs into the Excel file itself, and he opened this file up in the Excel application. And while he doesn't get into what he did to set up his environment to allow him to safely do that, you can assume, hey, we've got a VM that's throwaway. It's going to be network isolated and has Office installed on it. Obviously, there's no real reason to risk compromising a real system just to see this file. And there's a lot of write-ups out there that we can use about how to set that up for ourselves. Opening up the document, the spreadsheet claims to be a DocuSign encrypted document. To decrypt this document, and then you may find this to be a little unusual for decryption methods, but they prompt you to enable editing of the Excel file and enable content. Enable content meaning turn on your macros to view the document that will decrypt this file. And so he flipped over and started looking at it, and sure enough, he found macros in the document. And they were fairly brief, actually really easy to understand. There was minimal obfuscation going on in there. The URL was clearly visible, calling out to pull down what looked like some kind of GIF image, or supposedly a GIF image, that then runs run DLL32 against it to execute the DLL that was being pulled down and masquerading as a GIF. He did check out the URL and he said, okay, this isn't available anymore. It was pivoted to some threat intel feeds and found that basically, this was a malicious document for CACBOT. So, which is a download or info stealing bit of malware. Why am I running through all of this? Because it's, it's kind of interesting to watch somebody go through this, and it's kind of fun to go through this exercise yourself. And that was, I just looked at it and thought, hey, this is an interesting thing to incorporate into maybe our own practice. We have our various responsibilities, and sometimes we get called in to look at something specific that may or may not be malicious. And if you're just kind of like in my background, when I was just a regular old security engineer / sysadmin, I spent most of my time just kind of dealing with meetings and the normal run-of-the-mill stuff, and I didn't have always a lot of opportunity to practice at this. But I looked at this and thought, hey, this is a great way to basically stay familiar with this process, making sure that I have my environment set up properly to test out something like this and to examine a file. Obviously, there's no need for Capriva to go ahead and do all of this. He has a lot of experience in doing this type of work. I think he partially did it just because it was kind of fun, and partly because it was just kind of a good practice exercise to go through. So, it's something maybe we could look at making a habit for ourselves. And I thought I'd just kind of float this idea out here as a way for us to just, as we're, particularly those of us who are newer in security potentially, who are listening, this is a way of practicing some skills, of building out your lab, making sure you're familiar with these steps and you can safely go through this process. And that way, when somebody does, and inevitably it happens, somebody comes over and forwards you an email, or you get asked to look at something, you have some things set up, and you've got some experience to use in this, and you're not wondering, well, what do I do next, or oh crud, I got to build a VM, that sort of thing. You don't have to stop with this sort of thing here. I mean, we could. You could look at just pulling emails and looking at Excel files or malicious Word docs or PDFs, but you can get malware very readily to practice with. One of the searches I follow on Twitter, for example, is hashtag OpenDir, OPENDIR. People are regularly tweeting out here about websites with open directory listings that have malware in them. And, you could pull down one of those files and practice on that as well. And I just like to keep it up. So if I'm feeling like, hey, I've got a few minutes, let's pull this down and take a look. This goes beyond just doing a malicious document. You can get into the compiled code. Anyway, I just think it's a great, idea for training ourselves. Training budgets are limited. We may not have a lot of time. You may not be able to spend an entire week away from work readily. But here are some ideas for things we can do to practice and prepare. If you aren't familiar with reverse engineering compiled code, and I'll be honest, I only have cursory knowledge of it myself. I've done a little bit, not a ton. You can do some searching online and find videos on how to reverse engineer things like x86 binaries. And, you walk through, you get familiar with the process of going through assembly code and figuring out what's going on and tracing things back. I've actually found some full classes done that way, and this is all totally free stuff. A little bit of discipline on our part to do that, but it's still useful. Personally, I found the blog post by Mr. Capriva to be pretty cool. Just a fun read, see how he went through that. And again, just a useful example of something that we can do to develop and put into our own routine. It doesn't take a ton of time to go through something like this, but you stay familiar with it. You make sure your VM, again, is ready to go. So if this sounds interesting to you, go ahead and check out the blog post. The link is in the show notes. And, spend some time thinking about it. What can you do to improve your skills? Your next exercise may be right there in your spam folder waiting for you. So go ahead and take a look at that and have a good time.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, that's fun stuff. I love that reverse engineering stuff. And it's always great when you can get hold of stuff that's available to you for free and it's out there and it's fun to look at. OpenDir is cool. So check that out if you haven't checked that out already, because there's lots of fun. There's lots of fun stuff that basically is based on other people's suffering. So
basically, yeah, it's kind of amusing to see what pops up.
Yeah, and that's the best kind, right? It's when it's like, look at those guys. It's not me. Thanks. All right. Thanks, Jason. And finally, if you missed it, NASA has now released a collection of footage of Perseverance landing on Mars from a lot of different angles. One of the cameras failed, but it's really cool video if you like such nerdy kind of things as, spacecraft landing on other planets. The very, very nice video, which always impresses me that, that something was being videoed and streamed from that far away. And if you think about the math involved in shooting a tin can from the Earth, which is spinning really fast, and it's in a solar system which is also spinning pretty fast, and that's all spinning around each other, and it's in a galaxy of moving objects that are all rotating around some point or multiple points, and then you manage to not only do all that math, but you figure out how to hit a target that is millions of miles away, and it's also spinning really fast. And it really makes you want to do more math, right? I mean, it makes you want to sign up for another math class. Or maybe it doesn't make you do that, but it makes me want to sign up for another math class. So anyway, there is now a drone on Mars that can be managed and driven around. So far, they've run about 5,000 commands on it, and the thing even has its own personal helicopter. So the drone has its own drone. That is definitely violating the FAA regulations, since it's about 60 million kilometers out from the maximum distance you're supposed to fly a drone, and it's being flown around on Mars, but I guess there's not a lot of air traffic there. And don't forget, everything is spinning like a bad night at Frankie's. So, and that's the news, and the continuing time of plague. I really hope I get to stop saying that someday. It's great to be back. I'm Doug White, and that is the news.